You know that classic image of Sherlock Holmes, right? He takes one look at a person's hat and suddenly he knows their entire life story. It seems like magic, like some kind of superpower. But what if it's not? What if his genius isn't a gift, but a method? A method that, believe it or not, any of us can actually learn.
I mean, think about his most famous quote. It's not some mystical saying. It's a blueprint for a process. The real secret to cracking any problem is just to methodically cross off all the things it can't be. Once you've done that, what's left? Well, that's your answer, no matter how wild it sounds. So yeah, it really isn't magic. It's a method, and that's the big idea here. Sherlock's incredible abilities, they're not something he was just born with. They come from a very specific, structured approach. It's this powerful mix of a certain mindset, some serious observation skills, and a really systematic way of thinking. And the best part? It can be learned.
All right, so let's break this method down. We're going to start with the Sherlock mindset itself. Then, we'll get into how to see what others miss. After that, we'll talk about thinking outside the box to generate ideas. And finally, we'll cover something called the astronaut's method to put it all together.
Okay, first up, the Sherlock mindset. Before you can even start solving a case, it all comes down to having the right mental framework. So what was really going on in Sherlock's brain that set him so far apart from everyone else?
Well, for starters, his so-called superpowers were pretty incredible. The guy was a true polymath. He knew a ton about a ton of different things. He had an encyclopedic memory, which he famously called his brain attic. He was a master of ciphers and forensics, an expert in handwriting analysis, and he was just an incredibly keen observer of people. He could read a person like a book.
But here's the real secret, and it's not some magical, off-the-charts IQ. His actual advantage boiled down to two principles that anyone can adopt. First, a hardcore commitment to objectivity. You let the facts lead you, not your own biases. And second, a relentless, disciplined curiosity that pushed him to always be learning, always adding to that brain attic. So, you've got the mindset down. Now, how did he actually do it? This brings us to our next section, seeing what others miss, which is all about observation and deduction. It really all starts with how he processed the world around him.
You know, there's a huge difference between just seeing something and truly observing it. Seeing, that's passive. It's just what your eyes register without you really thinking about it. But observing, that's an active process. You're deliberately looking for details, you're absorbing information, and you're making mental notes about what matters. You're asking why things are the way they are.
And once he's gathered all these details through observation, he uses what's called deductive reasoning to connect the dots. The easiest way to think about it is like reverse storytelling, right? You start with the effect, say, a strange stain on the carpet, and then you work backwards, using all the clues you've observed to figure out the most likely cause.
All right, so you've observed the facts. You're starting to piece things together. But what happens when the answer isn't just right there? Well, that's when you have to start thinking outside the box. It's time for some creative ideation.
Now, Holmes himself never would have used this name, but his way of thinking actually lines up perfectly with a really cool framework called the scamper method. It's basically a set of 7 different thinking techniques that help you spark new ideas by just messing with what already exists.
Okay, so here's how the scamper framework breaks down. Each letter is a prompt. S is for substitute. What if you replace one part of the problem with something else? C is combined. Can you merge 2 different ideas into one? A is for adapt. How can you adjust something that already exists to fit a new purpose? M is for modify. What happens if you make a feature bigger or smaller? P is put to another use. Can this thing be used for something completely different? E is for eliminate. What parts can you get rid of to make it simpler? And finally, R is for reverse. What if you flip the process on its head? It's a fantastic toolkit for getting unstuck.
So you've got the mindset, you've got the creative ideas, but that's still not the whole picture. You need a systematic way to execute your plan, especially when the pressure is on. And for that, we're going to look at what I call the astronaut's method.
So the big question is, how do you put all of this together? How do you take that sharp observation and those creative ideas and turn them into a real solution? Well, the answer comes from a method that was tested in literally one of the most stressful situations you can imagine.
We're talking about the Apollo 13 crisis. You know the story. An explosion happens, and the astronauts are stranded hundreds of thousands of miles from Earth. Back in Mission Control, Flight Director Gene Kranz didn't panic. Instead, his team relied on this methodical, 8-step process that allowed them to solve one impossible problem after another under insane pressure.
And this method is something you can use for any problem. The first 4 steps are all about analysis. Step 1, define the problem. And I mean really define it, clearly and objectively, so you're not chasing the wrong thing. Step 2, figure out your goals. What does a win actually look like? Step 3, just generate a ton of alternative solutions. Don't judge them yet. And step 4, evaluate the consequences of each of those options.
Okay, once you've done your analysis, it's time for execution. These are the last 4 steps. Step 5, choose the best course of action. Step 6, plan out the implementation in detail. Don't just wing it. Step 7, implement that plan with full commitment. And step 8, and this one is so important, adapt as you go. Watch what's happening, take in new data, and be ready to adjust your plan.
And that's really the whole thing. If you want to boil it down, the Sherlock method is a simple formula. It's keen observation, plus creative ideation, plus systematic execution. It's not just one thing, it's how these 3 pieces work together. You observe to get the facts, you brainstorm to find the possibilities, and you execute methodically to get the result.
So, that's how you do it. That's how you take a problem that seems completely impossible and break it down into something you can actually solve. The method is powerful, and now it's yours. The only question left is, what impossible problem are you going to solve first?